So Count Dankula has had his legal appeal rejected. He put up a video in which he explained how his second submission for appeal has just been rejected. This closes to him the path to the Scottish Court of Appeal. Apparently there is no plausible argument imaginable against his verdict. At least not according to the Scottish legal system. I'll be honest, my evaluation of the Scottish legal system at this moment is that it is not worth a bowl of spit. Anyone who has followed this case in any detail knows this to be a miscarriage of justice. This is not partisanship on my part. I did not even like the joke in question, and Count Dankula knows as much. But it is self-evidently a joke. To conclude that it is anything else makes no sense. To find it proved beyond reasonable doubt to be something other than a joke is plainly foolish. The sheriff's court which found Count Dankula guilty was foolish. The appeal court in its confirmation of this verdict by not even allowing for a hearing on the matter is equally foolish. Let's be quite clear. To believe that it is proved to be some sort of Nazi propaganda, and that not a shred of doubt is possible regarding that interpretation is foolish. One is blinded by one's sense of offence, and has lost one's rationale in the process, and thus one's judgment is foolish. The last paragraph of the appeal court rejection is stunning in its obtuseness. Likewise, the appeal against sentence is not arguable. So once more, in the imagination of the appeal court there are no other possibilities conceivable other than for this to be grossly offensive nastiness. The idea that this is merely an offensive joke with humour as its primary aim is inconceivable to the appeal court. Thus application for appeal must be rejected, as it would not stand a chance. But please, before I launch into further soliloquy here, let's continue with this legal gem. This was a deeply unpleasant offence, in which disgraceful and utterly offensive material was very widely distributed by the appellant. This was to the considerable distress of the community in question, and just as disturbingly to the apparent approval of a large number of persons who appear to share the appellant's racist views. So it is to the approval of a large number of persons. What possible legal relevance can that have? If I punch a man in the face, and a great many bystanders approve of my doing so, in what way would that possibly be relevant to subsequent legal considerations? I punched a man. Whether anyone cheered or not does not alter that fact. As for the considerable distress to the community, I understand that there was one witness there to attest to his distress. One witness. And yet here is the appeal court deriving, by some Scottish legal means of mental osmosis no doubt, what the entire Jewish community thinks of the matter. I would wonder how many people within the Scottish Jewish community even knew about the existence of this video prior to it having been made a public issue by the police and the courts. Meanwhile, also notice the words deeply unpleasant, disgraceful, utterly offensive material, and disturbingly. What do all those expressions have in common? They are all entirely subjective in nature. These are personal opinions. Or please someone tell me what the Scottish legal definition of the words unpleasant and disgraceful are. Furthermore, there was that flourish, which did not escape my notice, of the appeal court referring to these many persons apparently sharing Count Dankula's racist views. So that he is a racist is proved beyond reasonable doubt, is it? Because if so, I would like to see the evidence to support that claim. For if the video was the only thing to support that matter, well, I have seen the video. I didn't find it particularly funny, but at no point was I ever led to believe that the man speaking to the dog was an actual racist. And yet, whereas I saw no racism at all, the court concluded racism was proved beyond reasonable doubt? Or is the Court of Appeal once again expressing a subjective opinion? Or more likely, are in fact both courts doing so? But let us continue. Indeed, it must be observed that in the circumstances the appellant was fortunate that the learned sheriff was not considering custody as an option. So here is the appeal court in its rejection of the appeal, suggesting that Count Dankula can count himself lucky not to have been incarcerated. For what, precisely? For the supposed offence to the wider Jewish community, for which the prosecution could only muster one singular witness? How, in any sane person's mind, could anything that was done in that video clip, warrant time spent in prison? To what avail? To whose protection? In punishment of what harm done? But there is more. The Scottish Court of Appeal saves the best for last. I also refer to the Sheriff's report at paragraph 83, where he deals with the plea in mitigation. He charitably describes this as unusual. On my reading, it appears to be wholly improper. It involved an attack upon the bona fides of the police and prosecution, an apparent refusal by an officer of the court to accept the verdict of that court, an apparent attempt to intimidate the court in the sentencing process by reference to a publicly funded appeal, expressions of personal views on the outcome by the solicitor, whose professional duty was clearly confined to submissions in fact and law, and an apparently enthusiastic endorsement of the appellant's defiance. For an officer of the court to engage in such behaviour is at best unprofessional and improper, and would certainly merit a professional complaint. Indeed, for my part, I consider the solicitor was fortunate not to himself require representation on the matter of contempt. So, first off, I have no idea what paragraph 83 represents. Count Dankula promises to release both documents once he has them. Maybe that will shed some light on this, I do not know. But an attack on the bona fides of the police and prosecution would sound to me like questioning whether they were operating in good faith. Now, given the context of this case, who would not question whether the police and prosecution were operating in good faith? How come the press were already in situ outside Count Dankula's house on the day of his arrest? And when a prosecutor is arguing that a man with a communist star tattoo on his chest is seeking to spread Nazi propaganda and is somehow communing with his fellow fascists online via a pug in a YouTube video, is it really too much to question whether he is operating in good faith? Frankly, I would have questioned his sanity. But apparently the fact that the solicitor of Count Dankula was not willing publicly to accept the verdict, or so at least we are led to believe by the Court of Appeal, is somehow reprehensible. Now, I do not know what the law is in Scotland in that regard, but I stress once again that this is a self-evident miscarriage of justice. Are we really saying that a man who dedicates his career to the law in Scotland should parrot the findings of a court, when those findings to any reasonably minded person sound deranged? The mention of the potential of a professional complaint, more so of a possible charge of contempt, by the Court of Appeal no less, sounds to me like a veiled threat. I have no idea about the customs and conventions of the Scottish courts, but this whole matter to me sounds unhinged. There is even talk of attempted intimidation by reference to a publicly funded appeal. How can the mention of a publicly funded appeal be intimidatory? I do not even know how to guess at that possibility. The suggestion itself seems in keeping with the rest of the court's findings, namely inexplicable, impenetrable to reason. Moreover, to question the professionalism of a solicitor, when in the very same paragraph you have just declared this appeal inarguable, I can only describe as unwittingly ironic. This entire affair is shameful. It brings into disrepute the entire Scottish jurisprudence. It shames Scotland, and it shames the United Kingdom. I know many will claim this to be hyperbole on my part, but I profoundly believe it is not. Of course miscarriages of justice can occur, but that is precisely the reason for which we have appeal processes. For a higher court to remain so blind to the self-evident injustice which has taken place here, to reject any attempt at appeal out of hand, by use of a collection of highly subjective verbiage, is scandalous. I can only close in my declaring that I find the appeal court reaction to be deeply unpleasant, disgraceful, and utterly offensive. Disturbingly, I find it willfully ignorant. To be honest, I pity the poor bastard who is the next appellant to rely on the supposed wisdom of the Scottish Court of Appeal. I suggest the legal teams instead consult a tarot card reader. Frankly, they'd likely get more sense out of that manner of learned advice. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed quite irritated. That is all from the Cyberpass for now. Thank you very much, and goodbye.